I donated a kidney to my husband. Months later, I caught him cheating on me with his secretary. I'm bored of you, he replied. I packed my things into a shopping cart, wrote a letter, and left it on the table. When he read it, he called me 44 times. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment which city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Catalina, and I'm 61 years old. I never thought that at this age I'd be telling a story like this, but here I am, sitting in my small apartment, remembering the day that changed everything, the day I decided to give my kidney to Arthur, my husband of 30 years. It was a Tuesday in March when Dr. Martinez gave us the news. Arthur needed a transplant urgently, or he wouldn't live more than 6 months. I remember that moment perfectly because the world stopped. Arthur was sitting next to me, pale as the office wall, and I could only think of one thing: I had to save him. There's a waiting list, the doctor explained, but it could take years. His best option would be a compatible donor from his family. Arthur looked at me with those blue eyes that had made me fall in love so many years ago. He said nothing, but I already knew what I had to do. That same afternoon, I had my compatibility tests done. When the results came back a week later, the doctor seemed surprised. You're a perfect match, Mrs. Catalina, but I must warn you that at your age, surgery carries significant risks. Arthur took my hand. You don't have to do it, my love. We can wait. But I'd already decided. Doctor, when can we schedule the operation? The following weeks were a whirlwind of medical preparations, blood tests, x-rays, and consultations with different specialists. Arthur seemed relieved, but also distant. I attributed it to nerves and the stress of his illness. My sister Elena was the only one who tried to dissuade me. Catalina, are you crazy? Arthur can get another kidney. You only have a spare. Elena, he's my husband. I love him, I replied. If it were the other way around, he'd do the same for me. She looked at me with a strange expression, as if she wanted to say something more, but she just sighed. I hope you're right. The night before the surgery, Arthur and I stayed up late. I was nervous, not about the operation, but about the possibility that something might go wrong and I wouldn't be able to save him. Are you sure? He asked me for the umpteenth time. I've never been more sure about anything in my life, I replied, caressing his face. We'll get through this together. He kissed me, but the kiss felt different, cold, mechanical. I thought it was nerves. On the day of the operation, we arrived at the hospital at 6 a.m. Dr. Martinez explained the procedure once again. Mrs. Catalina, the operation will take approximately 4 hours. Recovery will be 6 to 8 weeks, and you must understand that you will live with only one kidney for the rest of your life. I understand, I said. Arthur walked me to the preparation room, took my hand, and said, "Thank you, Catalina. I don't know how to repay you for this." Those words puzzled me. In 30 years of marriage, he'd never mentioned repaying me for anything. We were a family, a team. But I was sedated before I could think about it too much. I woke up 8 hours later with pain I'd never experienced before. It was as if a part of my soul had been ripped out along with my kidney. The nurse told me everything had gone perfectly and that Arthur was already awake in his room. Can I see him? I whispered through a dry throat. In a few hours, when you're more stable, she answered with a kind smile. I spent that first night alone, hooked up to tubes and monitors, thinking about Arthur, imagining his relief, his gratitude, the years we would have together now that he would be healthy. When I finally saw him the next day, Arthur was sitting up in bed, looking better than he had in months. The color had returned to his cheeks, and his eyes were bright again. How are you feeling? I asked, even though I could barely stand. Restored, he answered, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Thank you so much, Catalina. Again, that strange formality, as if I were a nurse. Not his wife. My recovery was slow and painful. I spent 6 weeks in bed, depending on Arthur for everything. He cared for me, but there was something different in the way he treated me. He was efficient, polite, but cold. He no longer looked at me as before, he no longer touched me tenderly. "She's being very dramatic about the pain," he told me one afternoon when I complained of discomfort. "The doctor said it's normal." That sentence hurt more than the scar on my side. When I was finally able to walk normally again, Arthur had resumed his life as if nothing had happened. He returned to work, to his routines, to his schedule, but something had changed forever between us. One night, 2 months after the surgery, I found him looking at his phone and smiling. When I asked him what was so funny, he abruptly closed the device. "Nothing important," he told me. "Just work." But Arthur had never smiled about work, and he had definitely never hidden his phone from me. That night, while he slept, I lay awake thinking about everything that had changed. I had given my best, literally a part of my body, to save him, but I had the terrible feeling I'd lost something much more important in the process. I had no idea the worst was yet to come. The months following the operation became a silent nightmare. Arthur was vital and energetic again, but he was no longer the man who loved me. It was like living with a stranger who shared my bed and table but had stopped seeing me as his wife. He began working very late. His accounting firm, which had always closed at 5 p.m., now kept him busy until 9, 10, even 11 p.m. When I asked why so much overtime, he replied irritably, "Catalina, I lost almost 3 months of work because of the illness. I have to make up for lost time." But I knew that wasn't true. Arthur was a senior partner. No one demanded impossible hours from him. One June afternoon, while sorting laundry, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket, from a fancy downtown restaurant, Maison Rouge. The bill was $240 for 2 people. The date was the previous Tuesday. When Arthur had told me he had a business meeting and would eat a sandwich at the office, my heart started beating faster. In another pocket I found a florist receipt, $50 worth of red roses, purchased last Friday, the same day he came home without flowers for me. That evening, when Arthur arrived at 10:30, I showed him the receipts. "Can you explain this to me?" I asked, my voice shaking. Arthur looked at the papers and sighed, as if I were an annoying child asking silly questions. "Catalina, I took an important client to dinner. The flowers were for the receptionist. It was her birthday. It's all work." His explanation sounded reasonable, but the way he avoided my eyes told me he was lying. "Which client?" I persisted. "I don't think you know him." "Roger Pemberton." "He's new." That night I called Elena. "Sis, I think Arthur is cheating on me." "Do you have proof?" she asked. "Just a gut feeling, and some strange receipts." Elena sighed. "Catalina, maybe you're paranoid. You just had major surgery. Your mind and body are still healing." Maybe she was right. After all, I'd lost weight after the operation. I had a horrible scar. I felt old and tired all the time. But the signs kept appearing. Arthur started showering immediately when he got home, something he'd never done before. He started using a new cologne, one I hadn't bought him. His phone was always face down and on silent. One morning in July, Arthur left early for an important meeting. I had a 6-month post-op checkup with Dr. Martinez at the medical center, just 3 blocks from Arthur's office. After my appointment, where the doctor confirmed my remaining kidney was functioning well, I decided to surprise Arthur and have lunch together, like we used to. As I pulled into his building's parking lot, I saw Arthur's car, and he wasn't alone. In the driver's seat was my husband. In the passenger seat was a young, slim woman with long blonde hair. I didn't recognize her immediately, but when Arthur leaned toward her and kissed her passionately, it felt like a knife plunged into my chest. I froze behind a column, watching the scene that destroyed my world. The woman laughed. Arthur caressed her face tenderly, the same tenderness he no longer showed me. They kissed again, and this time I clearly saw her face. It was Samantha, his secretary. The same 28-year-old who had been so understanding during Arthur's illness, who had sent me flowers after my surgery, who always greeted me with a smile at the office. The world began to spin. I leaned against the column to keep from falling. It all made sense now. The late hours, the bills, the coldness, the distance. My husband, the man whose life I had saved, was betraying me with a woman 33 years my junior. They got out of the car together. Arthur took Samantha's hand, and they walked toward the entrance like a normal couple, as he and I used to walk long ago. I managed to reach my car without being seen. Once inside, I began to cry with an intensity that frightened me. They weren't just tears of sadness, but of deep anger and humiliation that burned inside me. I had given my kidney to this man. I had risked my life for him, and he repaid me by cheating with a woman who could be his daughter. I drove home in shock. When I arrived, I sat in the living room and tried to process what I had seen. How long had this been going on? Had it started before the operation, during my recovery? That night, Arthur came home at 11, casual as ever. "How did it go at the doctor?" he asked, taking off his coat. "Fine," I answered neutrally. "Everything is perfect with my kidney." "That's great," he said, and went straight to the shower. I sat in the living room listening to the water run, knowing it was washing off her perfume, washing away her kisses, erasing the evidence of his betrayal. For the first time in my life, I understood what hate meant. I wasn't just hurt or disappointed. I was furious. I had sacrificed my body, my health, my well-being for a man who no longer loved me, and had probably never truly valued me, but I hadn't heard the worst yet. That would come later, when I finally confronted him. His words would be so cruel they'd change everything forever. I spent 3 days torturing myself with what I'd seen, 3 days watching Arthur act as if nothing had happened. Every time he smiled, every time he asked how my day had gone, I felt nauseous. It was like living with an actor who'd forgotten he wasn't on stage anymore. On Friday night, Arthur announced he had to work Saturday. "It's an urgent case," he said, checking his phone. "I'll probably be out all day." That was the final straw. "Arthur, we need to talk," I said firmly. He looked up, annoyed, as if I were interrupting something important. "I'm reviewing documents for tomorrow." "Now." Something in my tone caught his attention. He put the phone down and looked at me. "What's wrong, Catalina?" I sat across from him at the dining table, the same table where we'd had breakfast for 30 years. I took a deep breath and spoke the words I'd rehearsed for days. "It's Samantha." Arthur blinked once, twice. For a moment I saw panic, but he quickly recovered. "What do you mean?" "I saw you two together in your office parking lot on Tuesday, after my appointment." Silence. Arthur stood stock still, calculating. Finally his shoulders relaxed, and he sighed. "Well," he said coolly, "I guess there's no point in pretending anymore. No apology. No shame. No explanation, just confirmation of my worst nightmare, delivered as casually as a weather report." "Is that all you have to say?" I asked, my voice trembling. Arthur leaned back and studied me like a stranger. "What do you want me to say, Catalina?" "That I'm sorry, that it was a mistake." "It wasn't." He laughed without humor. "No, it wasn't a mistake. It was a decision." His words hit like a slap. "A decision." "Yes." I decided I don't want to be in this marriage anymore. I don't want to be with you anymore. I gasped. I had imagined many scenarios, apologies, promises to end the affair, pleas for forgiveness. I never imagined such utter coldness. But, Arthur, we've been married for 30 years. I saved your life. I gave you my kidney. And I'm grateful for that, he said. Like thanking a doctor after a routine appointment. But that doesn't mean I have to be tied to you forever. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Tied down? Is that how you see our marriage? Arthur stood and paced. Catalina, I'm going to be honest with you for the first time in a long time. I'm bored with you. Those 4 words tore at my heart. Bored. Yes, bored. You've aged badly. All you do is complain about your operation, your aches and pains, how tired you are. You don't take care of your appearance like you used to. You're no longer the woman I fell in love with. Arthur, I'm 61, you're 63. We've both aged. I haven't let age get the better of me like you have, he shot back cruelly. Samantha makes me feel alive again. With you, I feel old and trapped. I staggered to my feet. When did this start? It doesn't matter. It does. Was it before the operation, while I was donating my kidney to you? He looked me straight in the eyes. It started 2 months before I was diagnosed. The world stopped. What? I was already seeing Samantha when I got sick. In fact, I thought about canceling the operation and letting things take their natural course. I couldn't breathe. But you accepted my kidney. Of course I accepted it, he said with a smile that felt like ice. I was going to die when I had the choice to live. But that doesn't mean I wanted to stay married to you. Then you used me, I whispered. I gave you the chance to do something meaningful with your life, he replied without a hint of remorse. You should be grateful. The anger I'd bottled up finally exploded. Grateful? I risked my life for you. I never asked you to, he yelled back. That was your decision. I never signed a contract saying I'd love you forever just because you gave me an organ. His words were so cruel, so calculated, they left me speechless. This was not the man I had married, the man I had sacrificed so much for. Do you love her? I asked finally. More than I've loved you in the last 10 years, he answered without hesitation. That was the final straw. I want a divorce, Arthur said, businesslike. We can do this civilly or complicatedly. Your choice. Arthur, I said, my voice breaking, we're a family. We've built a life together. Catalina, you built a fantasy. I've been living a lie for years. No more. He headed for the stairs, then turned. By the way, I'm spending the weekend with Samantha. When I get back Monday, I hope you've processed all this, and we can discuss terms like adults. I heard his suitcase. I heard the door. I heard the car drive away. I sat in the empty living room, processing the magnitude of the betrayal. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had used me, taken my kidney knowing he no longer loved me. Knowing he would leave me as soon as he was healthy. It was worse than an affair. It was a cold, calculated manipulation of my love, my devotion, my very life. But Arthur had made a mistake. He'd underestimated the woman he'd been married to for 30 years. After he left, I sat until dawn. I didn't cry, I had no tears left. Instead, I felt a cold clarity. For 30 years I had been the perfect wife, keeping the house spotless, cooking dinners, organizing gatherings, smiling and nodding when Arthur made decisions without me, and, ultimately, sacrificing my body to save him. But that woman had died during that brutal conversation, In her place was someone who had nothing left to lose. Saturday morning, I did something I should have done years ago. I reviewed our finances. Arthur had always handled the money, telling me not to worry about complicated things. I had been a fool to trust him completely. I opened his computer, the password I knew from when he was sick. I logged into our accounts and nearly fainted. The savings account I thought had $70,000 had only $12,000. The checking account showed expenses I didn't recognize, payments to expensive restaurants, a luxury jewelry store, even a hotel on the outskirts of town. The dates went back almost a year. He hadn't just been cheating with Samantha longer than he admitted, he'd also been spending our savings on her. I dug further and found something that made my blood run cold. Arthur had taken out a $20,000 loan against the house 3 months earlier. The money was transferred to an account I didn't recognize. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he'd been stealing from me. In his email, I found exchanges with a matrimonial lawyer dating back 2 weeks, when I still believed our marriage was worth saving. Dear Mr. Whitman, one email read, "My wife donated a kidney to me several months ago. Will this affect my position in the divorce? I don't want her to use that to gain financial advantage." The lawyer's response was technical and cold. Organ donation isn't a marital asset. It might generate judicial sympathy. Document any erratic behavior. He had been planning this for weeks. While I was recovering, he was consulting lawyers and plotting how to get rid of me. There were also emails between Arthur and Samantha that made me sick. They spoke not only of their love, but of their future plans. Arthur promised they would be together as soon as I get rid of the burden. The burden was me. In one particularly cruel email, Samantha wrote, "Do you think she'll make a fuss when you tell her?" Arthur responded, "Catalina is too weak to make a fuss. She'll probably cry and accept whatever I offer. Women her age don't have many options." I closed the computer and sat quietly. He hadn't just used me to save his life, he had planned to destroy mine. But there was something he didn't know, something I had discovered during my last visit to Dr. Martinez and had been holding on to until I was sure. I went to my room and took a sealed envelope from my jewelry box, test results the doctor had ordered as part of my post-donation follow-up. The results showed something Arthur didn't know, something I believed would change everything. Before I could use that information, I had to get out. I couldn't be there when he returned. I started packing, but not how he'd expect. I didn't pack suitcases or call a mover. I went to the garage and pulled out the old shopping cart I used for the market, the same cart Arthur always criticized, saying it made me look like a classless old woman. Perfect. It was exactly the image I wanted to project. I filled the cart with essentials, clothes, documents, a few family photos, my medications. I didn't want anything he'd bought, nothing with his mark on it, only what was truly mine. Then I wrote a letter, not tearful or pleading, but a letter that would change the course of everything. "Arthur, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't try to find me. Don't call Elena. You've made many mistakes in recent months, but the biggest was underestimating the woman you've been married to for 30 years. Enclosed are copies of the medical results I received last week. Read them carefully and call Dr. Martinez about the implications. You'll also find copies of your emails with your lawyer and with Samantha. Yes, I know about your schemes, your lies, and your systematic theft of our savings. The most important thing you need to know is this: the kidney I donated is showing early signs of rejection. In the next 6 to 12 months, you may need another transplant. You used my kidney to save yourself, thinking I'd given you a new life with another woman, but what I gave you was only borrowed time. I hope you've enjoyed these months with Samantha, because when she finds out you need another transplant, that you'll go back on the waiting list, that you might die waiting, we'll see how deep her love runs. Don't look for me, don't call, don't beg. You had your chance to be honest, to respect me, to value my sacrifice. You chose cruelty and betrayal. Now you'll live with the consequences, Catalina, P.S. The $12,000 left in our savings, I donated to the Organ Transplant Foundation, in honor of all donors truly appreciated by their recipients. I left the letter in the center of the dining table with copies of all the documents. I took my cart and headed for the door. On the threshold I paused and looked back at the house where I had spent the best years of my adult life, where I had believed I was loved and valued. I no longer felt sadness, only a strange sense of freedom. I closed the door and started walking down the street, pulling my shopping cart like a homeless old woman. Some neighbors looked at me curiously, but I didn't care. As I walked to the bus stop, my phone started ringing. I knew who it was without looking. Arthur had found the letter. The calls wouldn't stop, 44 missed calls in the first 2 hours. Each time I rejected the call, the phone rang again. The desperation in his persistence gave me bitter satisfaction. I had taken refuge at my younger sister Elena's apartment, 40 minutes away in a neighborhood Arthur always considered too ordinary. "Catalina, what's going on?" Elena asked when I arrived with my cart. Eyes swollen from crying. "Why aren't you answering your phone?" "Because Arthur is finally experiencing the consequences of his actions," I answered, leaving the cart by the door. Elena frowned. "What are you talking about?" I told her everything: the affair with Samantha, the brutal conversation, the documents on his computer, and finally, the bombshell in my letter. "Wait," Elena said. "You're telling me his body is rejecting the kidney you donated?" "Exactly. The tests show early signs of chronic rejection. Dr. Martinez says it occurs in about 20% of transplants, especially with large age differences between donor and recipient." Elena was quiet, processing. "And Arthur doesn't know?" "He had no idea. I was going to tell him this week after consulting more specialists, but when I discovered his betrayal, I decided he could learn the way I learned about his." My phone rang again, this time a text. "Catalina, please answer. We need to talk. This is important." I deleted it without responding. "Sis," Elena said gently, "I know you're furious, and you have every right, but if he's sick again, shouldn't you at least talk to him?" "Elena," I interrupted, "that man used me. He accepted my kidney knowing he didn't love me anymore, knowing he would leave me as soon as he was healthy. He stole our savings to spend on another woman. Why should I care about his health now?" "Because you're a better person than he is," she replied. Maybe she was right. But I was no longer the same woman who had donated her kidney without hesitation. My phone rang again, from an unknown number. "Mrs. Catalina?" a woman asked. "This is Sandra Martinez, Dr. Martinez's nurse. The doctor needs to talk urgently about your test results." "I already spoke to him last week," I said. "He explained the kidney rejection." A pause. "Ma'am, I think there's a confusion. Your husband Arthur came to the office this afternoon with a copy of the results you gave him. The doctor needs to clarify some things with you. Can you come tomorrow morning?" I agreed to meet Dr. Martinez at 9 a.m. After hanging up, I stared at the phone with a strange unease. "What is it?" Elena asked. "I'm not sure. The doctor wants to see me tomorrow." That night I barely slept. The calls continued past 2 a.m. Arthur had stopped calling directly and was using different numbers. Some messages sounded desperate, others furious. "Catalina, this is ridiculous. I'm your husband. We have to talk. Why are you doing this to me?" I called Dr. Martinez. "He says there are things you don't understand about the results. Please answer." That last message worried me. What things didn't I understand? The next morning, the nurse ushered me straight into the office. "Catalina," the doctor said, "I need to clarify something very important." "What's wrong, doctor?" "Your husband came in yesterday with copies of test results he said you gave him. results supposedly showing his body is rejecting the kidney you donated. Yes, I said. Those are the results I received last week. Dr. Martinez shook his head. Catalina, those weren't Arthur's results. They were yours. The world stopped. What? The tests I ordered last week were your post-donation follow-up. They showed elevated markers in your remaining kidney function, not problems with Arthur's transplanted kidney. I couldn't breathe. But you told me, I told you we needed to monitor your kidney function carefully. Because donating a kidney at your age poses long-term risks. I never said anything about transplant rejection in Arthur. The room began to spin. So Arthur is okay? The kidney you donated is working perfectly. His latest tests from 2 weeks ago are completely normal. I sat frozen, processing the magnitude of my mistake. Not only had I misinterpreted the results, but I had used that incorrect information like a nuclear bomb in my letter. Doctor, I asked shakily, what exactly do my results show? It means your remaining kidney is working harder than it should to compensate for the loss of the other one. We expected this, but in your case it's happening faster than normal. Is it serious? Not immediately, but you'll need constant monitoring and possibly medication in the future. Kidney donation, especially at your age, carries long-term risks for the donor. Arthur knew this when he accepted my kidney. The donor risks are discussed in pre-op consultations. Both of you were present, he said gently. I vaguely remembered those meetings. Arthur had asked many questions about his recovery, success rates, prognosis. I had been so focused on saving him that I barely paid attention to the risks for myself. When Arthur came yesterday, what did he say? I asked. He was very upset. He said his wife gave him incorrect medical information and he wanted to know the truth. I explained his transplant is functioning perfectly. He looked confused and very angry. I left in shock. Not only had I made a terrible mistake, but now Arthur knew I had lied. He knew I had made him believe he was dying when, in reality, he was fine. My phone rang as I stepped outside. Catalina. Arthur's voice was cold as ice. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Arthur, I can explain, there's nothing to explain. You tried to make me believe I was dying. You made me have the worst night of my life. You lied. You deliberately gave me false medical information to torture me. That's sick, Catalina, sick and cruel. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Arthur, I misinterpreted the results. It was a mistake. A mistake? Was it also a mistake to steal the $12,000 from our savings account? My heart sank. How do you know that? I went to the bank this morning. You wanted to humiliate me, right? Run me out of money while I dealt with dying? It wasn't like that, Catalina. You just proved exactly what I thought. Manipulative, vindictive, willing to lie about life and death to hurt someone. He hung up. I stood on the sidewalk, shaking, understanding I had destroyed any chance of keeping my dignity. In my attempt to get revenge, I had become the villain of the story, but he didn't know that he, too, had made a mistake, one that would soon come to light and change everything again. 3 weeks after my disastrous exit, I had settled into a routine at Elena's. I found part-time work at a local bookstore, simple, steady. I stopped checking my phone obsessively. I stopped waiting for Arthur to apologize. Then a Tuesday afternoon call. Mrs. Catalina, I'm Rebecca Morrison, matrimonial lawyer. Your husband hired me to handle the divorce. My stomach tightened. I understand. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss terms. There are some complicated issues. What kind of issues? I'd prefer to discuss them in person. Tomorrow at 2 p.m.? That night Elena tried to calm me. "You'll be fine. You're entitled to half of everything." But I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Arthur was smart, manipulative, and now he had ammunition. A good lawyer could paint me as unstable and vindictive. Rebecca's office was downtown in a glass tower. She was young, polished, and all business. "Before we begin, I must inform you that my client has made serious allegations, that you provided false medical information intending to cause emotional distress, and that you stole funds from joint accounts." "Can I explain both?" I asked. "I'd like to hear your side," she said neutrally. I explained everything: the confusion with the results, my emotional state after discovering the affair, and my donation to the Transplant Foundation. "I understand you've been through a difficult time," she said finally, "but my client's behavior during the marriage doesn't justify providing false medical information. That could be considered emotional abuse." "Emotional abuse?" I repeated, stunned. "Your client had an affair for over a year. He used me to save his life and spent our savings on another woman, and I'm the abuser? Infidelity is painful, but it's not illegal. Providing false medical information to cause psychological distress could have consequences." I understood. This wasn't a negotiation. It was intimidation. "My client is willing to be generous," Rebecca continued. "He offers $25,000 and your personal car. In exchange, you waive any claim to the house, retirement accounts, and other marital assets. We were married for 30 years. I gave him a kidney. The organ donation was voluntary and is not a divisible marital asset," she replied smoothly. "I need time to think." "Of course. But if you reject this, my client is prepared to proceed with an emotional abuse claim. That could result in you receiving nothing, and possibly facing criminal exposure." I left feeling defeated. Arthur had turned my pain and confusion into a weapon to destroy me financially. He was brilliant in his cruelty. Apparently, the universe had other plans. 2 days later, while working at the bookstore, my phone rang. "Unknown number, Mrs. Catalina, it's Samantha." I froze. "Samantha?" "Yes, Arthur's secretary. I need to talk to you. It's important." "I don't think we have anything to talk about." "Please," she said, voice trembling. 5 minutes. "It's about Arthur. There are things you need to know." An hour later, we met at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. Samantha looked very different, eyes swollen, dark circles. "Thank you for coming," she said. "What do you want, Samantha?" She took a breath. "Arthur left me." I couldn't help a bitter smile. "And I should know because I thought it might give you some satisfaction, knowing your letter worked." "My letter?" "The letter about the kidney rejection." "Samantha, that information was wrong. Arthur is perfectly healthy." "I know. He told me after seeing the doctor, but the damage was already done." "What do you mean?" "When Arthur got your letter, he came to my apartment in a panic. He was crying, saying he was going to die, that he'd need another transplant. He asked me to marry him immediately so we could be together for whatever time he had left." "And what did you say?" "I told him I needed time." She looked me in the eyes. "The truth is, I was scared. It's one thing to have an affair with a 63-year-old married man when he's healthy and successful. It's another to commit to someone who could die soon and need intensive care." I felt a strange mix of disgust and satisfaction. "When he found out you'd misinterpreted the results, he came to confront me," Samantha continued. "He was furious. He said I was an opportunist, that I only cared when it was convenient. He shouted that if I really loved him, I wouldn't have hesitated to marry him when I thought he was dying." "And he was right," I said quietly. She nodded. tears in her eyes. Yes. I don't love him. I liked the idea of being with someone successful, someone who took me to expensive restaurants and bought me pretty things. But when I thought I'd have to care for him while he died, I realized I'm exactly the kind of person he said I am. Why are you telling me this? Because I wanted you to know that even though your medical information was wrong, your letter revealed who we all really are. Arthur discovered I'm not the love-struck woman I pretended to be, and I discovered he's exactly as cruel and calculating as you said. She stood to leave, then paused. There's something else. Arthur is having problems at work. Apparently he used client funds on our dates. Not much, but enough to get him in trouble with the State Board of Accountancy. He could lose his license. After she left, I sat a long time, processing. My letter, though based on incorrect information, had revealed everyone's true nature. That night I called Rebecca. I've considered your offer, I said, and I reject it. I'll fight for what I'm owed. I warned you about the consequences. She began. I think your client has more to lose in a protracted legal battle than I do, I said evenly. Especially if certain ethical issues come to light during discovery. A beat. What are you talking about? Misappropriation of client funds. An accountant who could lose his professional license. A man with far more to hide than a hurt wife who made a mistake. 3 weeks later, Arthur agreed to a settlement that gave me half of all marital assets, including the house. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of cruelty, just signatures. I didn't stay there with all those memories. I sold it and used my share to fund my retirement. Arthur lost his accounting license 6 months later. It turned out he had been borrowing from client accounts for years to finance his lifestyle and his affair with Samantha. He declared bankruptcy and eventually moved to another state. Samantha got a job at another firm. I saw her once at the supermarket months after the divorce. She looked older, more tired. When our eyes met, neither of us spoke. We simply recognized each other as two women who had learned difficult lessons about love and betrayal. As for me, something curious happened in the months following the divorce. My kidney function, which had been declining according to my post-donation tests, began to stabilize. Dr. Martinez said it was probably due to lower stress. Chronic stress can profoundly affect organ function, he explained at a follow-up. Now that you've eliminated the major sources of stress from your life, your body is healing. It was ironic. I had given my kidney to save Arthur, worried that my sacrifice would risk my own health. In the end, what truly harmed my health was the marriage itself. Today, 2 years later, I'm sitting on my small balcony, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. My life is simpler now, smaller in some ways, but infinitely more peaceful. I work in the bookstore. I read more than I have in decades. I've taken up painting again, a hobby I abandoned when I married Arthur. Elena and I are closer than ever. Some nights, when the pain in my side bothers me, I think of Arthur. I wonder if he ever regrets what he did, if he ever truly understands what he lost. Most of the time, I don't think of him at all, because I finally understood something fundamental. The greatest gift I gave him wasn't my kidney. It was my freedom when I decided to leave, and that is a gift that can never be returned, stolen,